You guys still write the black books, right?
We do, although most of it is now electronic, of course.
It's not we're not carrying them around like we used to years ago. You have a unique ability on China in that you actually taught there years ago. As you perceive the China you knew years ago and the China now, what's the biggest difference?
Well, when I was in China in the early 1980s, the question was, would they be able to actually go from poor to middle income status, which they've achieved in the last 30 years, growing at an amazing 10% real compound over that span. So living standards in China have, for the average person, basically almost quintupled.
And at some point it ends, right?
And at some point it has to end because the business model in China was dependent on investment-led, export-driven growth. And at this point, the amount of investment spent in China is absurdly high by any historic standard, even in China, and the export share of China is extremely high, and that had to change no matter what.
And sort of the background question right now about China is, having reached this status, are they caught in the middle income trap? Can they make this transition to start buying stuff, or are they stuck making stuff? How are they going to weather this transition well?
I think that is the question, and it's extremely difficult to know. We debate that a lot internally, and as we see it, they have the right strategy, which is to try to focus on domestic consumption-driven growth, because consumption in China is very low relative to GDP, and that is the opportunity for them. The challenge is that means they have to really restructure their whole business model, adapt to slower but more persistent and more value-added oriented growth.
One of the highlights of the week was Jack Ma at the Economic Club of New York. To your point, Brendan, is Mr. Ma the future of spurring that consumption?
I think that's a really good question, because China has...
It's not a good one of the day, so, you know, that's it.
And it's early. I mean, it's
early,
it's 6:07, so...
Yeah. But China has an opportunity in many ways to try to essentially take advantage of leapfrog technologies, like what's happened on the internet, to reshape its economy. The problem is no one's ever done that before. And another problem for China is that its demographic transition is happening very quickly as well. So the Chinese labor force is going to shrink dramatically over the next 10 years by probably over 100 million people.
Well, I wanted to ask about exactly that, which is that, you know, we tend to talk numbers, particularly if you don't understand China, which I definitely don't. What is the cultural shift that has to take place to get them to buy more?
Well, I think that a lot of this is actually not just culture, but also regulation. Chinese people aren't disinclined to consume. They've been in a system where there was a lot of forced savings. And as the Chinese economy liberalizes, I think you'll see demand will grow. But the question is, can that become self-sustaining, and will growth be able to continue at this, call it 6 to 7% real level that we've now seen it stabilize in?
In Vani, the 100 million that Seth quotes, non-farm payrolls is 141 million. So it's giving up 60 or 70% of the American labor force in the next 10 years.
What I was going to ask is the Shenzhen and Shanghai indexes obviously have seen, you know, a huge boost recently, and retail investors are getting more and more involved. How do you read those gains in Chinese stocks? Is it real the way we understand it here in the U.S.?
I think that, put it this way, Chinese stocks have gone from being pretty cheap a year and a half ago to being pretty expensive now. And one reason why is that there was a clampdown on all the other things Chinese people can invest in. Basically, if you're Chinese, your options are real estate, which is now being basically subdued by the anti-corruption and other controls, bank loans or bank deposits, which are not really keeping up with inflation even, or stocks. And so what you've seen is an explosion in interest in stocks.
Instead of consuming, right?
Well, they're buying stocks and even going on margin to buy stocks. And that's not just instead of consuming. That's probably not the same people who would be, in every case, consuming. But I definitely think that you have to be very careful now in China. Certainly some of the stocks in China have gotten absurdly expensive.
Very good. Seth Masters with us for the hour with AB Bernstein.